Remember how you and Wallow were crying? You and Wallow were crying. Oh, my son got killed. Oh, you were crying. Now you talking about snitching. You goddamn right I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Gang, I got family. I got willing to risk their lives and freedom to die by me and mine. You hear me? Why don't play with me, man? So far up your ass, you'll floss your teeth with my shoelaces, nigga. Play with me, bro. Don't play with me, bro. Don't play with mine, bro. Don't play with mine. Just don't play with mine.
Charleston White thought he could keep poking the bear without consequences. For years, we've watched this provocateur target T.I.'s son, King Harris, with increasingly vicious attacks, from death threats involving Trayvon Martin to constant mockery of the young man's every move. But when you mess with a father's child, you're playing with fire. T.I. has had enough. The Atlanta legend is stepping up once again to defend his family. And this time, his message to Charleston White is crystal clear. Some boundaries should never be crossed. This is about to get explosive. Charleston White thought he was just stirring up his usual drama when he went on a recent tirade, brutally attacking King Harris and declaring he is nothing.
You say I'm a nobody. Your son a nobody now.
3.
But this time, the controversial YouTuber may have bitten off more than he can chew. Sources suggest White's increasingly desperate attacks stem from his own jealousy, watching a young King Harris command respect and attention that White never achieved, even in his so-called prime. The 48-year-old provocateur, fresh off legal troubles and a declining platform, seems to be lashing out at King's natural charisma and growing influence. Now, word on the street is that Charleston White is allegedly afraid to come online, realizing he may have finally crossed a line that even he can't talk his way out of. T.I. didn't hold back when he addressed Charleston's latest breakdown, and he's made it clear that he sees right through this desperate act. The Atlanta rapper expressed his disgust, explaining that Charleston is so miserable in his own life that he's attacking children just to stay relevant. T.I. pointed out that White is a 48-year-old man with nothing to show for his existence, except stirring up drama about other people's kids, emphasizing that White's jealousy stems from watching King at 20 already command more respect, opportunities, and future prospects than the provocateur ever had or ever will have.
Had to say about my son what some grown man had to say about my son, man. Cause somebody please just pull me up to speed, man. Just pull me up to speed. How some grown man had some to say about my son. Just pull me up to speed on that, man. Just pull me up to speed on that, man. What sucker ass grown as wasted his whole life doing absolutely nothing. Got something to say about my son at the beginning of his adult life.
The Atlanta legend didn't stop there. Dismantling White's credibility piece by piece, T.I. reminded everyone that this is the same man who testified against his own friends, got arrested for pepper spraying cats, and gets beat up at comedy shows before calling the police. He noted how White is now online crying about his son because he knows King represents everything he'll never be, young, talented, and actually loved by his family. T.I.'s assessment was brutal but accurate, exposing how White is trying to be relevant in the worst way possible by attacking successful black families because his own life is a complete disaster. But it was T.I.'s final warning that sent chills through anyone listening. After being patient and restrained for so long, the protective father made his position crystal clear with a simple but powerful message.
No gang, I ain't in no gang. I got family. I got who willing to risk their lives and freedom to die by me and mine. You hear me? Why don't play with me, man? Don't play with my child.
The warning was unmistakable. White's desperation had pushed him into dangerous territory, and T.I. was done playing games. But White's attacks on King Harris aren't just coming from a place of jealousy. They're coming from a man whose world is crumbling around him. The self-proclaimed truth-teller peaked in 2023, but those days are long gone, and his time in the spotlight has expired, never to return. White's desperate attempts to stay relevant have been overshadowed by a string of serious legal troubles that have exposed him for what he truly is, a washed-up provocateur with nothing left to lose. In October 2024, White was arrested in Tarrant County, Texas, on charges of animal cruelty and aggravated A with a deadly weapon. The animal cruelty charge stemmed from allegations that he hurt a cat by pepper spraying it, a level of cruelty that shocked even his most dedicated followers. He was held without bond at the Lon Evans Correction Center, a clear indication of how seriously authorities were taking these charges. But that wasn't the end of his legal nightmare. In February 2025, White was arrested again on aggravated A charges and held without bond at Fort Worth Area Corrections Facility. Though he was released a few days later, claiming the charges were dropped. The pattern was clear. White had become a repeat offender whose legal troubles were mounting faster than his declining relevance. The man who once commanded attention through controversy is now more known for his mugshots than his opinions. Sources close to T.I. suggest that the Atlanta legend is prepared to resort to any measure necessary to keep leeches like White out of his and his family's life. T.I. has made it clear that he won't tolerate anyone threatening his children, especially not a man whose own life has become a cautionary tale of wasted potential and self-destruction.
I put my foot so far up your ass, you'll floss your teeth with my shit. Don't play with me, bro. Don't play with me, bro. Don't play with me.
The irony is staggering. A man who snitched on his own friends as a teenager, who now cycles through arrests for animal cruelty and aggravated A, somehow believes he holds moral authority over King Harris. White's chaotic resume, marked by courtroom confessions, jail stints, and viral meltdowns, makes his judgment of any young man, let alone one working to forge his own path, look absurd. It's audacity disguised as commentary, and nobody is buying it. The truth about White's rise to notoriety reveals a pattern of chaos and controversy that stretches back decades. Born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1977, White's life has been marked by violence and dysfunction from the very beginning. At just 14 years old, he was involved in a robbery that resulted in the M of Michael Levy, leading to his conviction and 7 years in juvenile detention. White lost his right eye in a childhood accident and grew up in a fatherless home, creating the perfect storm of abandonment and rage that would define his adult persona. These attention-grabbing stunts are perfectly up his alley because controversy is literally all he knows. He bursts on the social media scene not through talent or genuine advocacy, but through shock value and inflammatory comments about dead rappers like DMX and George Floyd. Nobody kept track of where he actually came from because he exploded into relevance through pure toxicity, bypassing any legitimate path to influence. What makes White's attacks on young people like King Harris particularly disturbing is that it reveals a twisted psychological pattern rooted in his own unresolved trauma and jealousy. Despite founding Hype and claiming to mentor youth, White consistently targets successful young black men, particularly those from stable families. Everything he never had growing up without a father and dealing with abandonment issues. His obsession with attacking rappers' children stems from his own deep-seated resentment towards those who achieved what he couldn't: genuine respect, family stability, and success without having to tear others down. White admits he felt unloved, unwanted, and rejected as a child, and now he projects that pain onto young people who represent everything his broken upbringing denied him. The man who spent his formative years in juvenile detention for M can't stand watching King Harris navigate young adulthood with opportunities and family support that White never experienced, which is why he can't seem to leave successful young people alone. The Charleston White versus T.I. saga didn't start as a calculated attack. It began as the desperate flailing of a man whose relevance was already slipping through his fingers like sand. By October 2022, White had built his entire online persona around shock value and controversy. But he was running out of targets who could give him the reaction he craved. That's when he made the fatal mistake of setting his sights on T.I.'s family, not realizing he was about to poke a bear that wouldn't hesitate to maul him in broad daylight.
Yeah, and he going to jail again. He ain't grew up tough like his daddy.
The feud ignited on October 8, 2022, when White went on one of his trademark unhinged rants, targeting not just one, but two rappers' sons, Boozy Badass's son, Tootie Raw, and T.I.'s son, King Harris. At the time, both young men were dealing with legal issues. King had recently been arrested alongside Tootie, and September 2022, giving White the ammunition he thought he needed to launch his assault. But here's where White's psychology becomes crystal clear. Instead of offering guidance or understanding, as someone who claimed to work with troubled youth, he went straight for the jugular with vicious personal attacks.
Nigga, your mama and daddy raised a yellow. Yeah, that nigga T.I. son say, I whoop.
White's initial attack was particularly cruel, targeting King's appearance and predicting his future failure with the kind of sadistic glee that revealed just how much he enjoyed tearing down young black men. The timing wasn't coincidental. T.I. was in the middle of promoting his comedy tours and trying to balance his entertainment career with parenting challenges that were playing out in the public eye. White saw vulnerability and pounced like the opportunistic predator he's always been. What White didn't expect was that King Harris, unlike many targets of online bullying, had a backbone to stand up for himself. On October 9, 2022, the 18-year-old fired back during an Instagram live session calling White exactly what he was, a snitch and a coward who preyed on young people for attention. King's response was measured but firm, showing the kind of maturity that must have infuriated White even more. Here was a teenager displaying more class and composure than a grown man who'd spent decades perfecting the art of public humiliation.
With the point of who did what, who, man, we about to whoop when you come back down here from telling. Yo, I can see you had a soft upbringing.
King's pushback was significant because it exposed White's fundamental weakness. When confronted by someone who wasn't afraid of him, his tough guy persona crumbled instantly. The young man didn't resort to the gutter-level tactics that White specialized in. Instead, he pointed out White's history of cooperation with law enforcement while maintaining his dignity. It was a masterclass in how to handle a bully, and White couldn't stand it. This is where White revealed his true nature and crossed a line that should have ended his career permanently. Instead of accepting that he had been outclassed by a teenager, White doubled down with threats that can only be described as psychotic. On October 10, 2022, he made what amounted to death threats against King Harris, invoking the names of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin in a display of racism and violence that shocked even his most dedicated followers. White's relevance to the Trayvon Martin case wasn't just offensive, it was a calculated attempt to terrorize a black teenager and his family using one of the most traumatic incidents in recent American history. This wasn't trolling or controversy for clicks. This was a grown man threatening to M someone's child and wrapping it in the language of America's most notorious hate crime. The fact that White felt comfortable making these statements revealed the depth of his hatred for successful black families and his willingness to weaponize racial trauma for personal gain. But White didn't stop there. He claimed to have contacted Atlanta police and Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis trying to get King arrested.
This they called the laws, and they came. He over there.
This move exposed his true strategy. When he couldn't intimidate the Harris family through threats, he attempted to use the criminal justice system as his personal weapon. For someone who claimed to advocate for young black men, his eagerness to involve law enforcement against a teenager was particularly disgusting. The moment T.I. learned about White's threats against his son, the gloves came off completely. The Atlanta legend had been patient with critics and trolls throughout his career, but threatening his child was a red line that White had foolishly crossed. T.I.'s response on October 10, 2022 was swift and uncompromising, making it clear that White had awakened something he wasn't prepared to handle. T.I.'s protective instincts kicked in with the fury of a father who'd built his entire life around providing for and protecting his family. At this point in his career, T.I. was focused on his comedy ventures and trying to guide his children through young adulthood, but White's threats forced him back into warrior mode. The veteran rapper made it crystal clear that he would spare no expense and risk his own freedom to protect his son from anyone who threatened him.
Just don't play with mine. I ain't finna say no name. I don't play police game. If I go to jail, it's gonna be for something. It's gonna be for something. I don't play no police game, man. I don't play no police game. I don't play no...
The contrast was stark. On one side, you had a father defending his child with a kind of measured intensity that comes from real love and responsibility. On the other side, you had a bitter, childless man whose only claim to relevance was his ability to attack other people's families. T.I.'s response carried the weight of a man who had everything to lose but was willing to risk it all for his family, while White's attacks came from someone who had nothing to lose because he had already lost everything that mattered. In what should have been a moment of de-escalation, T.I. and White had a phone conversation on October 10, 2022, that was supposed to resolve their differences. Instead, it became another example of White's inability to function like a normal human being when given the opportunity to step back from the brink. The call failed spectacularly, with White later describing it as unsuccessful and using it as fuel for even more provocative content. White's response to their failed conversation was to issue a celebrity boxing challenge to T.I., complete with a bizarre request that Steve Harvey referee the match and that T.I. wear an eye patch to even the odds. This challenge revealed everything wrong with White's mindset. He genuinely believed that his threats against a man's child could be resolved through some kind of publicity stunt that would benefit his own brand. The audacity was breathtaking. White had made threats against a teenager and was now trying to monetize the situation through celebrity boxing.
T.I. and Charleston White are back in the news. It seems like they're setting up a boxing match between each other. I guess T.I. didn't like what Charleston White had to say about his son, King.
The boxing challenge also exposed White's fundamental misunderstanding of what he was dealing with. T.I. wasn't interested in turning his family's safety into entertainment. He was focused on real-world implication of White's threats. While White was thinking about pay-per-view numbers and social media buzz, T.I. was thinking like a father whose child had been threatened by a man with a history of violence. Throughout the feud, Charleston White repeatedly brought up T.I.'s involvement with Crime Stoppers, trying to paint the rapper as a federal informant because of a commercial he made after his 2007 G case. This attack was rich coming from a man who had literally testified against his co-defendants in a M trial and openly bragged about cooperating with law enforcement. White's ability to attack others for the very things he was guilty of revealed a level of hypocrisy that would have been impressive if it weren't so pathetic.
Everybody know, homie. That man say he a 7-time convicted felon in one song. 7 convicted felon. I would have said 7 convicted felon.
The Crime Stoppers angle became White's go-to attack whenever he needed content, but it backfired because everyone could see the obvious contradiction. Here was a man who built his entire adult persona around being a reformed gang member while attacking another man for participating in community safety initiatives. It was projection at its most obvious, and it made White look even more desperate and foolish. When T.I. appeared on Juicy Fruit's track Step in November 2022, widely considered as a Charleston White diss, it should have been the end of the story. T.I. had addressed White musically without stooping to his level, delivering bars that dismantled White's credibility without resorting to personal attacks or threats. It was the kind of measured response that showed T.I.'s class and experience in handling conflicts.
I know man who ain't got shit going on, ain't got no real talent, can't do nothing but kick up dust and wait on that shit to fall down so they get dirty and some clout get to them. I know that's how get paid.
But White, true to form, completely missed the point. Instead of recognizing that he'd been outclassed and backing down, White praised the track and begged to be included in the remix. This response revealed everything wrong with his psychology. He was so desperate for attention that even being dissed by a major artist felt like a victory to him. White had become the kind of person who would celebrate being insulted if it meant someone important was paying attention to him. What makes White's attacks on King Harris insidious is how they've continued sporadically over the years, always timed to moments when a young man was dealing with personal challenges or family issues. White's pattern is always the same. Wait for a moment of vulnerability, attack with maximum cruelty, then claim victimhood when people respond with appropriate outrage. It's the behavior of someone who never learned how to get positive attention and has resigned himself to being hated as long as he's noticed.